Blackstone is offloading homes across the US, and in the process, they're taking massive losses on many of their properties. Take, for example, this home covered by Reventure Consulting. It highlights just how rough the market is in places like Florida, where a single distress sale doesn't just hurt Blackstone, it can also drag down property values across an entire neighborhood. Take a listen to him explain this phenomenon in this quick clip, and then I'll show you why it could get much worse from here.
Because I want to go back to this listing I showed you guys in the beginning. This is one of the biggest price cuts I have seen yet on the U.S. housing market. You can see this is a house, a 4-bed, 3-bath in Wesley Chapel, Florida, which is about an hour north of Tampa. It's a really nice suburb, actually. Demographic data on ReventRap shows that this zip code, where this house is, actually has a median income of $111,000. So this is one of the highest income zip codes in the Tampa metro, with 48% population growth over the last 5 years. And so in some ways, you would think this is the ideal area for an investor to own real estate, high income, growing population. Yet Blackstone bought this property for $490,000 at the peak of the bubble in 2022. They tried to rent it, right? They tried to rent it for $2,800 a month. They couldn't rent it. They cut the rent and then decided to sell. It was on the market for almost 8 or 9 months. I actually visited this property a couple months ago and showed it to you when its price was around $415,000, $405,000. Well, it ended up selling at $360,000. Price that's $162 a foot for a 4-bed, 3-bath house in a nice neighborhood. The new buyer of this house actually got a really good deal.
As you just saw, Blackstone, a corporate giant, took a 27% loss on this property despite being in what was supposed to be a thriving, up-and-coming neighborhood, just as Nick explained. During the pandemic, many blamed these massive corporations for driving up home prices. Now, as the market shifts, people are asking, could these same corporate investors trigger a downturn? With deep pockets and reckless spending, these companies were blamed for pushing supply levels down and sidelining regular everyday Americans, making home ownership increasingly unattainable for the middle class. In what was called the low-interest investment boom, dozens of corporations swooped in and began buying up entire neighborhood blocks. You see, in real estate, there is this simple metric called a cap rate, and what it shows you is how much of a return you can make on a typical property. Now, because most investors are financing their houses, this cap rate is very dependent on two factors: how much you can charge for rent and how much you are paying for interest expenses. Now, in the early 2020s, interest rates were absurdly low, the lowest in history. You could get a 30-year mortgage at nearly 2.5%. A few years ago, real estate was one of the most attractive investments around, and it's the reason why companies like Blackstone and its subsidiary, Home Partners of America, were buying up houses left and right. Rents were climbing, demand was surging, largely fueled by the pandemic, and investors were cashing in big. The numbers looked fantastic. Back in early 2021, the cap rate hovered around 6.3%. Meanwhile, the risk-free rate, the return you would get by simply parking your money in government bonds, was a measly 1%. In other words, if you left your money in the bank, inflation was eating it alive. But real estate, it was offering returns that looked incredibly attractive in comparison. Fast forward a couple of years, and the game has completely changed. Inflation surged, interest rates skyrocketed, and now the 10-year Treasury yield sits at 4.6%. Meanwhile, the cap rate on real estate has only inched up to 6.8%. Now put yourself in an investor's shoes. Would you rather earn a safe 4.6% just by letting your money sit in bonds, or jump into real estate dealing with late rent, evictions, property damage, lawsuits, price changes, and endless headaches for just an extra 2% return? For many, the answer is simple. The easy money now looks a lot more appealing. Real estate is still an okay investment, but it's no longer the obvious no-brainer it once was. Investors today are rethinking their strategies, and the days of easy, effortless profits might just be behind us. If we look at Redfin data, we can see that investors at one point made up around 20% of all purchases, meaning that 1 in 5 listings was scooped up by someone who was going to rent or flip the home. Today, that number is down to 16%. The last time we saw something like this happen was in late 2005, and as the trend of real estate investment slowed, the eventual outcome was a real estate crash in the winter of 2007, nearly 2 years later. Today, as we surpass the 2-year mark since the latest investment slowdown, many are wondering if history is going to repeat itself. In many parts of Florida and Texas, significant price declines are on the horizon. If you want real insight, listen to Bill McBride discuss this with Altos Research. These guys aren't just making dramatic predictions. Their analysis is backed by hard data, not hype. And if you listen to this short clip from their conversation, there is serious signs of decline in some of these markets. Take a listen.
And Miami, Miami, there are so many housing units on the market in Miami right now compared to demand. And there's actually more housing units, I think, in Miami. You would know better than me, just in general. But the month of supply is just through the roof.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that in some other areas, some other regional areas too. So this is going to be a year to watch regional and much more than national.
Yeah. So, and right. So Miami, actually a lot of the Florida markets, Western Florida markets, Austin, the inbound migration states where people have been moving from the north to the south, we've stopped moving. And that's why inventory is super tight in the north and it's super growing in the south. We've, at least for now, stopped moving. So the question is, what if we get to 5 months of supply nationally this year? Or what if we get to 8 months of supply in Miami? Are prices going to fall?
I think with 8 months of supply, they definitely will fall. I think with, I would be, prices are sticky downwards. So what you need is distress sales, unstick them, but we're not going to get a big wave of distress sales.
So there you have it. Bill McBride himself says that if supply keeps rising, price declines are inevitable. He downplays the idea of another 2008 style crash, arguing that we won't see the same wave of distress sales, but are we really so sure? Think about it. In 2008, the economic crash followed the housing collapse, not the other way around. And just because we haven't seen a major recession in 17 years doesn't mean we're immune. Many people today assume a full-scale downturn is impossible, but that's a privileged mindset shaped by an unusually stable era. Luck isn't a strategy. If you look at the data, the parallels are there. Back in 2008, price declines started in places like Miami and Las Vegas. Today, it's Austin and the entire state of Florida. The distress sales last time were triggered by a financial crisis, but this time no one knows where the next shock will come from. With BlackRock's latest sales, it's clear the market is shifting, and it doesn't take much for that momentum to change the entire landscape. There are signs that maybe this housing bubble isn't different, and it will come to an absurd stop very soon. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and let me know what you're seeing on the ground in the comments below, especially if you're in a market like Florida.